Veterans are the lifeblood of American freedom, serving in some of the harshest situations to secure that freedom across the globe. This is the Lounge with Legends show, celebrating their transformation from battlefield to business. The Lounge with Legends show with Marty the Moac Martinez and James A. Phelps, a.k.a. Spartan 6.
Is it recording? I'm not sure. So where are we at, James? Are we work. We're doing what we love. That looks terrible. Mine's dirty.
We're live? No, we're
live. We're live. Let's get this started. Hey, welcome. We have an amazing guest today. Old school.
Old school. Yes, we're going way back.
We're taking it out of like a page out of The Masked Singer where
we're going back Odie Green era.
I can see him shaking.
I know. I think his profile, I don't know if his shoulders are probably hurting right now.
All right, well, let's do this real quick. Let's just bring him on, and then we'll talk about everything else.
Let's go.
You're watching
Boom.
There you go.
We are bringing on Arnie Allen. The Tower is our legend today. We're live in Raleigh, North Kakalaki. I can't believe Marty drove his electric car down here to hang out with us.
Yes, it's electric.
He did. He was bragging. He said he spent like $3 to drive down here. But anyway, that's another story in itself. You know, this is going to be an amazing episode. This guy here, we rode up to a buddy of ours' wedding last weekend, to Bobby Hume's wedding. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Hume. But we got to talk on there. And he's like, when are you going to bring me on the show? I said, you know what? You are a legend. Let's do it. So let's make it happen. Marty's coming here, and we did it. So here we are live in North Kakalaki.
Yeah.
So
welcome.
You drove up. Well, thank you guys, first of all, for having me on the show. Yeah. You drove up in your new EV.
Yeah.
Or it drove him.
I did it right because of the
I missed like about 10x.
But real quick on that, I mean, fortunately, we had enough power for you to be able to plug in.
True, I had to wait.
Yeah. I mean, we did have the hurricane that came through. Yeah. So
I know, James, you were without power last week for a little bit.
I was. Did you go out without power?
We had lost power for about 18 hours. Unfortunately, my home generator decided to go take a uniform on a bull. So that didn't work out so well.
So what you're telling me is, if for those that don't know,
improper PMCS was not pulled. I did.
I know, I'm doing mine now.
Yeah.
We have one at the house, and I don't think it's.
So
I'm gonna have to just check it a little.
Yeah. So a little TLC on it. Got it back and running.
Well, at least y'all both have a generator to actually utilize. I did not have a generator at all, so I was struggling to get things to work. So basically, we were out of power for about 7 or 8 hours.
Yeah.
But that's nothing compared to the things. Speaking of that, for the folks down in Florida, our thoughts and prayers with you for that. For those damages and some of those amazing, like just I don't know. Has that ever happened before like that?
Yeah, it's Florida.
Well, I was just bringing that question up because,
Right.
I figured he, from the 50s and 60s, he would know those things. No, on a serious note, though, we really, Marty always asks this question. And he talks about, go to war, go to jail. So you were in the Army, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So
yes.
Can you tell us how that happened?
I can actually. I was actually a freshman. I played my freshman year at Central Michigan University football. I was a defensive back. I injured my shoulder. This was in 1983, by the way. 82. Freshman, the fall of when I first started playing. Injured my shoulder and lost my scholarship because I didn't get the surgery that my coach wanted me to get. So I rehabbed it. I saw a friend of ours that was a orthopedic surgeon, said, hey, we could get you back to 100% use of the shoulder if you do this rehab thing. So I rehabbed it for about 6-8 months, and then decided to join the Army at that point. So when I went into the Army, I said, my dad was an air policeman in the Air Force back in the day, and he asked me why I joined the Army, and I go, because he was a lover, not a fighter. And I go, I guess I'm a fighter. But then, I saw the Ranger poster on the wall when I walked in. It was the old school, with guy from First Bat. Yeah, exactly. And you sit there and you see that and you go, I want to do that job. Well, the only job they had available was I was a radio operator, so 05 Bravo back in the day.
Okay.
So I was an infantryman with a radio and had a life expectancy of about 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds when I got on the battlefield. People like to show little antennas that's sticking up off your back. So for some reason, but yeah, so I ended up going, got in, got through jump school, went out to Fort Lewis for a short stint, and then and that was in '83. Then after that, shortly after that, I went up to Alaska and got stationed up there as a 172nd Infantry Brigade, and then it turned into 6 ID. So I was a 325 up there with the 5th Battalion, and then we transitioned. When we transitioned into the light fighters, of the 6th Infantry Division, they decided to put an alerts detachment out there. So that's when I first started doing my alerts stuff. I loved that job. That was the best job in the Army. Yeah. And they actually had so the unit came up and was doing recruiting up there. So I tried out for the unit, and my wife decided to talk me out of it because she goes, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to college or do you want to do this? So I got out and I went to 12th Group Reserve Charlie Company out of Detroit, reserve unit there, and then transitioned over to a Ranger Company in the National Guard. And then they actually turned into being an alerts unit after that.
Oh, okay.
So, and then, went back on active duty after I got my commission. So that was well after I had done that. So a couple of different transitions there, throughout my career. But and pretty much had to reinvent yourself quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
You know,
Right.
Well, I got to say thank you, though. You gave me some ammunition. My dad told me on the way here, he said, make sure you tell Alan I will be watching this episode. He doesn't watch that many episodes. Dang it, Dad, you need to do it. But you just gave me some Air Force ammunition.
There you go.
I'm a fighter, Dad. I'm not a lover.
There you go.
So I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be amazing because I can now use that and put that in my kit bag.
Yeah.
But, to be honest, did you have a little bit of notion that you wanted to be in the Air Force at all? Was there any?
I gotta say, no, not at all. I mean, even though
Cheers to that.
even though it was aim high, I decided, they did tell me that if I wanted to fly, I could go airborne. So
There you go.
at least that's what everyone tells me. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, my dad used to always joke about why do you want to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft? We hear all the stories, right? All the lines. So yeah, I gotta say, no regrets in anything I've ever done, and not only on active duty but in the Guard. After Desert Storm, I got engaged a little bit more, where I transitioned from being an NCO, I was an E7, into becoming a commissioned officer.
Right.
Benning School for Boys. Spent my time there, and then I transitioned from a signal officer to an infantry officer. So that was another
Right.
thing. But I'd always been in the infantry my whole career. Like I said, I just kind of carried a radio instead.
Right. Absolutely.
So shooting, moving, and communicating was what it was all about. But at the end of the day, that's really where you're going to.
It's a lot of opportunities for you to reinvent yourself,
Right.
transition, transform, just even with as the units. And if anyone's ever done reflagging a unit or reinventing a unit, it's a lot of work.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, we did Wolfhounds, 2nd Brigade.
Right. Yeah.
And we went from light fighters in the Kahukus and everything to strikers.
Right.
And that's a lot of work.
It really
And
is.
you have to learn a whole bunch of new stuff, and it just
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
And to your point, like even transitioning from back, before when they were going light fighters, right?
Right.
I mean, everything's on your back, right? And who thought of that? You're carrying 180 pounds of
Nothing light about it.
Yeah, nothing light about it. That's what I was going to say. Light fighters, where it's the oxymoron of the Army. It's like being military.
I think a tanker came up with that term.
Maybe,
Because
yeah.
it's relative.
Yeah, it's all relative.
It's
That
light
before
compared-
dismount, right?
It's light relative to the barbecue pits.
Right, yeah. Everything else they carry, right? Yeah, exactly. We're going to carry this. You guys carry that,
And so so what have you found that you still carry with you today? Like those lessons learned, not necessarily the rucksack carry.
Right. Yeah.
What do you carry forward with you today?
I think a lot of it is the values that I've learned, right?
Right.
You're in Ranger Battalion and you learn, it's about the standards, right?
Yeah.
And there's no compromise, right? So everything, if you can live that life, right, and live that standard, then everything else is easy, right? I was just having a conversation with my nephew at a wedding I went to this weekend, and I was telling him that he had got medically discharged from the Navy, and he was really disappointed in himself. And I said, "There's nothing to be disappointed." I said, "You are 1% of the nation's volunteers, right?
Right.
You are at that. You did what others. You met the call that others would not do, right?
Right.
And so at the end of the day, that's really what it boils down to. And for me anyway, was that I saw a different purpose in my life that I wanted to. I could have wallowed in self-pity, like, oh geez, I don't have any way of getting to pay for school.
Yep.
And I said, no, I got this other way of doing it, and I did it. I didn't want the easy route.
Right.
I wanted to make a difference, right? And I always thought that, we're not going to fight Russia on the big battlefield. The war is going to be in low intensity conflicts. So,
Right.
which is one reason why I decided that
Yeah.
I want to be that guy on the poster, right?
Yeah.
And so that really made a difference for me. And those are kind of, like I said, the standards is really what really drove me to kind of move forward and keep moving forward in everything I did. I could sit back and say that there's no decision I've ever made that I've regretted. The only thing I've ever regretted is never making a decision.
Right.
And that's one thing that I used to tell our candidates when I was a officer candidate, TAC officer and company commander, was the same thing. You can't be bogged down in not being able to make a decision, because people aren't going to follow you if you don't.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's a wrong decision, but the fact that you make a decision, people will follow somebody that does that.
Absolutely.
And so that's where I think, like I said, starting my career out as I did in the battalion kind of lended itself to that, right? And you've been there. It's one of those things where you're, just do it.
Right.
Move to the sound of the gunfire. And
Absolutely.
don't get stuck in the BS and the minutia, right?
Right. Absolutely. No, I think those are some very valid points. And really putting the onus on the decision making.
Right.
Don't have analysis by paralysis.
Right.
And I think some of that comes from your time as enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
And as officers, what I found, going from enlisted to is that's where you find the preponderance of analysis by analysis, paralysis by analysis, because you overthink it because you want that right decision. Whereas when you're coming from enlisted to the officer ranks, you got to make it happen. You got to make a decision and make it work. Otherwise, more people could get killed by not making that decision.
Right. Exactly. Used to call it polishing the BB, right?
Yeah.
You can sit there and polish the BB and make it so shiny. Then there's that little imperfection that, I got to rub that out. But at some point you got to deliver the BB, right?
Right.
The BB has to be fired,
Right.
and so every plan doesn't last the first contact, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's just a given,
Yeah.
but you have to be able to maneuver and first of all, have a plan. And then once you make the decision to move forward with that, then you adjust fire from there, right? Because no plan is ever perfect. And, like I said, if you're polishing the BB, you're never going to execute, right?
That's exactly what Eisenhower was saying.
Right.
The plan is nothing.
Right.
Planning is everything.
Yes.
And that's where you've sat down and you've identified the decisions that could be made, courses of action. And then when it is time to make a decision, you have enough knowledge to be able to make an informed decision.
Right.
Or based on your training, it's a battle drill.
Right. Exactly.
So,
Taking that into like when I worked in the 18th Thermal Corps in plans there, and talking through things like, planning what we're going to be doing and going into Afghanistan and then beyond that into Iraq.
Right.
Those types of things. That was, those were crazy days,
Yeah.
but those were the kind of plans you had to come up with. And then you walk like we talked before, the MDMP process, going through that,
Right.
that all makes, it all comes around but those are the kind of things that we've learned. And I've heard others talk about it. You guys have talked about it on your broadcast as well, on your podcast as well, is that, as enlisted and as an officer from both sides of my experience, I can take that, move that forward, and have moved that forward into the business world.
Right.
There's not a lot of people that have our type of experience in this space. They can read about it, but they've never executed it.
Right.
And, I always think it's funny when I sit in a room of executives and I hear things, parroted back to me from a book that I read for my business degree, and those kind of things.
Just like you. He reads. You remember the reason why I said I hate reading?
Right.
When I came to you, you're like, you got to start reading again. This is the reason. He was my boss for about four years or so. You were my boss.
Yeah.
This guy made me read. I was like, why are you making me read? So then when I retired, this is the reason why I quit reading. And then this is the reason why I started reading again. So both of you have the same thing in common. Then for those that are out here listening, he came down. He did not give me a book today. That is the first time that I have
gave
not
you a wall of books. Did you show the picture?
Oh no, I haven't.
Oh, that's true.
Good point. Touche. He did actually. We're gonna post that here in the comments. We'll post a picture.
But
if
if y'all are listening at home, James legitimately, there's someone that was actually someone's boss in this room. Like James was never my boss, but he was actually his boss for how many years?
4 years.
4 years.
True or false?
Unlike one day or whatever.
In order, according to the regulations, I don't know which division, Pam, or which Army regulations it would be, but if you signed an OER, even if you were an intermediate raider, are you not technically the boss of that young, steely-eyed second lieutenant?
I don't recall
Yes.
this OER. don't.
Matter of fact, I have it. I have an iPerm. I actually have it on a fish. I'll bring it in. We're going to bring that in, and we're going to have to compare notes. But no, seriously, on a serious note, the one thing that I do have always respected about you, Arnie, is the fact that it's about mentorship and paving the way for others. One fun fact about him, he won't brag about, so I'll be braggadocious for you, is he's had a direct impact on 250 young steely-eyed second lieutenants. So to me, that's where the legacy really is, because some of those lieutenants, granted, they're all lieutenant colonels probably by now,
Right,
because we're older, but they're all, still serving, and that value that you continue to give them, that mentorship, that tutelage, is really what's, to me, the most important impact that you've had in the military. So I appreciate that. It was an honor to work with you. Now, I'm not going to say the same thing.
So one of the things I want to ask is, because you came in and you said 83, 84.
Right.
And so that was like the height of the Cold War.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, things are, it was peacetime army, but you're always ready and you don't know what's going on. And then we go into the 90s where the walls come down. It's a little bit kind of odd. We just celebrated yesterday or on Monday, Black Hawk Down.
Right, I was going to say,
we Gothic Serpent Task Force Rage.
Absolutely.
And in 83, October of 83, we had Grenada.
Yep.
And so that was with the Rangers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And so from 83 to 93, those are two big Ranger events, which you were in at the time.
Right, yes.
And then you talked about your time in Afghanistan with 18th Airborne Corps. So now you've gone into the GWAT. So you've seen some different things.
Oh yeah. It's been very, very different in that way, right?
Yeah.
I guess as James alluded to, it's I guess I'm the as I always say, I'm the old man in the young man's sport, right?
Right.
So you kind of survive and do those kind of things. I mean, I was still pulling triggers in Afghanistan.
Right.
At 40, 48, I guess, I guess, and that's still young. I mean, I think in many ways, so you sit back and you look at all that, and I think what it's applied and how I've applied the knowledge that I've learned and gained through the years, right? You can watch how things evolve. I think probably one of the best books I've read outside of military tactic books, has been a book by Robert Baer called See No Evil, Hear No Evil, America's Quest for Saudi Gold.
Yeah.
And in that, it was, Baer's one of the outed CIA agents that was outed in an administration we won't discuss, but but he and his wife were outed, and so he wrote this book about how we focus so much of our attention on the Cold War after the Cold War was over, right? I mean, Reagan came in and really, hey, Gorbachev, right, tear down this wall. I mean, that shortly happened, very, very much several years after that, but it was really close to that time frame. And so now you got this guy who's writing about how he would go back into the CIA and say, hey guys, we're focusing on the wrong thing here. We need to be looking at Saudi Arabia and what they're doing with these Western schools and teaching these kids how to be anti-Western, right? And then out of that comes Osama bin Laden, blah, blah, blah. So, and what he did is he walked you from the Cold War all the way up to 2000, right? Basically up to 9/11.
Right. Wow.
And kind of talk through that whole process. Very interesting book that I read, like before 9/11.
Right.
And
if you follow all the lines, like Charlie Wilson's war,
right.
We empowered the Taliban to defeat our enemy.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we're fighting them. And so now they have the government.
Right.
And so, and we're back fighting Russians.
Right. Yeah.
It's breakdance fighting, not true fighting.
It's the shadow fighting, as I call it. Right?
Well, as long as there's no Red Dawn incident, I'm good to go.
Right. Yeah. My daughter was saying that the other day about this. She goes, I think it's going to be a Red Dawn day. I go, I don't know. Just got to be prepared. So we're prepping. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, you've spanned a pretty good career and seen, aside from all the uniform changes, technology changes. I mean, just from a comms perspective, the encryption and the rapidity of sharing information,
right,
and then the deluge of data,
right,
where you've gone through all this stuff. So how did you help pass those lessons on about focusing on what's important to your leaders. Going back to the initially, we were talking about the decision.
Right, yeah.
So we literally, and for those that aren't tracking, we went about 83. We're still fighting with Vietnam era tactics.
Absolutely.
So you have a commander and an aircraft looking at the battle and fighting the war that way. Then we go into more secure comms, and 90s, 2000, you get Blue Force trackers and stuff coming out. So now you get commander going back and micromanaging, and then it's just too much.
Absolutely.
So how did you help with that?
Well, so that's interesting. So when I actually got off active duty, went in the Guard, I actually started working. Took all of my experience and was able to parlay that into a career, and I actually worked for Cisco Systems for a while in their Skunk Works, is what they called it, a government solutions unit, and we were looking at doing things like putting routers in like lighter size, Zippo lighter size things, so that the unit and another SOCOM type units would be able to take, I just need a router, or I just need this, right? And they just pop it out and just be online. But yeah, so you're right. I mean, so I've been able to see all that transition in from HF radio to SATCOM to all of these things.
Sat phones,
right? I mean, heck, in Afghanistan we were using Iridium phones, right? From that perspective, it didn't work very well, but that's a whole different story. But as you start looking at, I think what really it took the GWAT dollars, right, to get out of the MSE mindset, right? We're no longer the mobile subscriber equipment. Yeah, thanks for asking. I use those acronyms quite a bit. So to get out of the mobile subscriber equipment, we're basically putting a telephone network on the battlefield, right? So and what it was recreated for was the Cold War, right? All we were going to do is defend the Gafalda Gap. And then we're falling back to the French countryside, basically. And the reason the MSE, or mobile subscriber telephone network, was developed was so that we could tie into that public network that belonged to France. And so you had all of that technology going. And as you move forward with that technology, it just kind of stopped, and there was no more. I mean, there was digital technology, but it wasn't the way that we deal with it now. So working for a company that I work for, Klas Telecom, we were able to embed technology that's small form factor, lightweight. You can pretty much take more to the battlefield but carry less, right? Meaning so it's and then you have things like ATAC and those types of things, that type of technology that allows, going back to Marty, to your point that you were making about the battlefield and how you see the digital battlefield, right? ATAC kind of plays into that. And I worked with other companies that started out really their own ATAC prior to ATAC coming in line, and it's used by SOCOM. Was this one product called Ronin, and we used to use it all the time, and that gave us situational awareness. So really the infancy stages of that really took off at Bagram Airfield, if you will, with those kind of things where we want to see the battlefield in real time. We don't want to see what's going on the map. I will say my 15 minutes of fame. I was interviewed by a CNN correspondent at Bagram Airfield, and I was at Siege Soda at the time, and we're sitting there, and she's asking me, the correspondent's asking me, well, what is it that's different about the digital battlefield versus the way you used to do things? And I said, well, and I picked up a computer and I said, well, this, ma'am, with a bullet in it is a paperweight. I dropped it, and I picked up a map, and I go, this with a bullet in it's still a map. Right. And I said, so I said, that's the difference. And I said, so if I said, the problem is going to be, and I see this coming down, and this is, early days, 2001, 2002 in Afghanistan. I said, what's going to happen is there'll be a point in time where our soldiers are going to be so dependent on the digital battlefield that this is becoming obsolete. They're going to have to go back to this, and they're not going to know how to do that. We got to train the way we fight, not fight the way we train, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really what we've gotten down to. And it I realize we have a different generation of soldiers these days, but there's still some value in using basic soldier skills, right? And teaching them the right way to do things. And I think, so for me, my company does a lot of the company I work for now does a lot in that field where we're taking and digitizing things at the edge, like data centers. Like we have a 19-inch solution that sits and goes in the overhead, and it weighs like 60 pounds and can go into overhead of a commercial airline. Now, I mean, that's great. It can roll on a C-130, roll off a C-130, and you can have command and control in the aircraft while you're en route. Like going to like Grenada or Somalia. Rolling that, or even jumping into Panama. Rolling that stuff on, having command control, and having it roll right off with you. That's important. Because that way you can do what you need to do to get in the fight right away. You're not having to set up stuff, right? Or you're not having to set an advance party in. That was always the big deal, right? Oh, we got to send it. We're going to go invade this country, but we got to send an advance party 4 weeks in advance to get up everything set up, right? So no one knows that you're there. Right?
Well, that's one of the most important lessons that, I think you even taught me this. We would all go and unplug the generators to the talk.
Right.
You want to see a talk really exercise, go to NCC, JRTC, unplug the plot of the talk, the cord to all the power. And let's see if you're, the soldier skills, the basic soldier skills there that are necessary. So I think that's a lost art. Hopefully, if you're watching, hopefully you budget for the lost art. And let's get back to the basics is what I would say.
Yeah. So what's the real, because we just talked about that yesterday. That's how I used to start off my classes with modeling and simulation officers, which are like uber geeks.
Right.
And I would start off, I would specifically use a red laser pointer and put it on the screen like, oh shit, you can't see that, can you? And then, oh, wait a minute, old school, but you can see my pointer.
Right.
Don't forget technology. Don't forget your blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
But what are those lessons learned? How can you take that and apply it to business today?
Right. Yeah.
What are those?
That's a good question. Because there's a lot of businesses that they don't do what we've done in the military after every exercise. You stop. What went wrong? What can we improve on? Right. That, to me, that's important. You made a very good point about blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
Don't lose your basic skills, blocking and tackling. That's what it boils down to. You always have to be able to do that. So yeah, I think that's where I see a lot of the boardrooms kind of miss the big picture in that way. They get so focused on, well, we gotta work on the bottom line, but we forget the soldiers or forget the people that work for you. They're resources. They look at them as resources, not as humans, right? And I think there's that we lose that and have lost that over this generation of new businesers. And I think getting back to appreciating people for who they are. Everybody brings something to the table. You can be 12 miles wide in knowledge, but 1 inch deep. And that's really what a lot of companies go for these days.
Right.
Instead of going, look, I need a guy that's 1 foot wide and 12 feet deep. Right. Having that experience and looking at experience, there's a lot of companies now that say, well, if you reach a certain age, we're going to go ahead and put you to pasture. Right. But then what you lose is you lose all that historical knowledge, right? And there's, I've seen that where, like I said, I worked for Cisco for 15 years, and that whole thing, it's like, geez, you're kind of old. Maybe you want to take a package, well, no, I don't want to take a package. I think I have a lot to offer, right? And so, but because it's, well, hey, you don't really fit the model, you don't look like a young hipster, right? So I think there's a lot of that a lot of businesses, like they focus on that instead of focusing on the blocking.
I think that's one of the things
basics
business could take from the military is that we, as James and I talk about this all the time, is planning your next business campaign, like
Right.
a mission.
Yeah.
You do mission analysis, mission planning, mission execution, mission assessment,
Mhm.
and rely on the graybeards.
Right. Exactly.
And
right.
so we have
all
you know,
that rolls
our-
all that rolls in. You know,
our
right.
3 and 4 stars during these. You talked about GRTC, NTC. That's when the graybeards will come and mentor
Mhm.
that new CG, that new brigade
Right.
commander,
Yeah.
someone who's been there. And like, okay, let me do. Good job, but let me talk to you. And it's
Yeah.
different than an OC, an observer controller,
Right.
saying that because it's somebody that typically they already respect.
Yeah.
Be like, huh, interesting. I see how I can take that lesson and put it up here.
Right.
Even though it's old,
Mhm.
the lessons learned are still there. That's why we still read Marcus Aurelius, and we're still reading all these people because
Right.
it's there. And they would be so lost in today's world with tablets and all this stuff.
Right. Right.
But we're still reading them. So
Right.
the relevance is still
Exactly. In going back to the days when I was OCS company commander and training these lieutenants, that was part of. I had a reading list, just like when I went to OCS, we had a reading list. You had to read X, Y, Z, right? And so I required it. It was required knowledge plus the reading list, right? And why? Why do you do this? Why did your company commander make you guys read? While you were, because that's a way to mentor you and
Right.
to teach you those lessons.
Mhm.
To your point, it's the graybeards that we learn from, and I think that's what really the military, where we get it right, is that we do take those lessons learned, and we recock, and we go back out and we do it again, and guess what? We learned our lesson from last time, but what we figured out is that we didn't do it the right way this time. Let's recock again,
right.
and let's fix it again, right? Until you get it to that point,
Right.
where it's running smooth.
Yeah.
I think that if there's any lesson that anybody transitioning from the military, and we should never sell ourselves short on that, can take into the business world, is that ability to make that assessment and provide that type of background, right? It's difficult for a lot of companies to want to leverage that from an individual, and I've run into that a few times where they've kind of like, well, or even you'll even get the little graybeard sometimes. I had a colonel, Air Force colonel that I worked for at Cisco one time, and he goes, Arnie, I don't think they're ready for this, this MDMP process, being able to do this. And I go, well, let's try it. We won't call it this, but let's try it.
Right.
And we'll go through there. We'll put up the courses of action. We'll talk through it, and what's pros, what cons, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and then then we'll select a course of action, then we'll execute it, and then we'll stop, and we'll recock, we'll figure out what went wrong the first time, and then we'll go again, and they ended up actually changing a lot of their processes because of that ability, right? They didn't know that they were doing it at the time, but they were just taking stuff that we'd learned, we knew already. Right.
Mhm.
It's about packaging, and then when they
Right.
do, they look at it and then they use it. I mean, there's a reason why the corporate world, not even corporate America, but the corporate world uses mission statements.
Right.
Where did that come from? If I can say,
Right.
somebody sold them on this of, hey, look, here's a statement where who, what, when, where, why, how.
Mhm.
By when, and what's my task, what's my purpose, and
Mhm.
what are we going to do?
Yeah.
But then they've gotten away from it so that the mission statement is painted on a wall,
Right.
and it's really now it's a vision,
Right.
not a mission statement.
Right.
So and that's what we would say in the military is it's okay as a business for your mission statement to change. You
Right.
need it to change.
Right.
That way you say FY23, we're going in. Planning starts now in Q4
Right.
for Q1.
Right.
And by X day, we're going to accomplish this by when, because of this. And so from that comes your MOPS and your MOs,
Mhm.
whereas they call OKRs, KPIs.
Right,
MOPS and MOs are measures of performance, measures of effectiveness. Are we doing the right things? Are we doing those things right?
Mhm.
Right. OKRs, KPIs, you can see the similarities in there,
Right.
line it with SMART goals, but all of that needs to have a common focus, which is the mission statement.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think that's where the corporate world has taken what we have and then kind of shook it up a little bit too much.
Right.
But the ones that are doing it well have those kind of things.
Absolutely do. I think
They added too, who, what, when, where, and then sometimes why.
why.
So now I think they focus a lot more on why am
Why.
I doing this? And
Yeah.
I think that, you need to have the why, but I think at the same time, I don't think that needs to be the focal point. So anyway, I mean, you might disagree with that, but
No, I mean, we don't have the why in the military because I don't want anyone to question the mission.
right.
When they execute.
Right.
Yeah.
But that why in the military is the purpose, task and purpose.
Right.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so that's your, we were execute an assault no later than blah, 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 in order to, that's kind of the why.
Right.
Is that in order to, everything after IoT.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes it becomes too, again, it goes too pie in the sky-ish.
Right.
Mhm.
It's painted on a wall, we already know it sucks because you're not going to be able to change it. You're not going to execute off of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's very true. Very true. I mean, you look at Simon Sinek. If
Yeah.
you've read him, and I'm a very popular guy, right? And he always talks about the why, but that's really what it boils down to. To your point, it is the task and purpose, right? So for us, we kind of, to me, it resonated when he started talking about the why.
Right.
When I've read him and seen some of his TED Talks, but going into a business and you start telling, well, the guys need to focus on the why. Well, what's the why? What is our why?
Yeah.
What's your task and purpose? Well, what do you
Right,
mean task and purpose?
yeah,
Well,
I mean,
you know,
and it gets scary. Well, what's
Yeah.
the why? And people think you're doing some kumbaya.
yeah, and
You know.
it's kind of simple. But-
I mean,
In
it
many
should be.
ways, it should be. Well, it should be. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I mean, it is. Why are we doing this?
Right.
And if you focus, if it's tied back to your blocking and tackling, like you
Mhm.
said,
Yeah.
then I'm to make money. Okay, so then why are we doing this campaign?
Right.
Why are we doing this particular launch?
Mhm.
Then you know why.
Mhm.
And so then it gives everybody something to understand. And then that, once you have that, and everyone's focused on the mission and knows how they're going to be measured,
Right.
and they know, okay, these are the OKRs for the
Mhm.
departments. These are the KPIs for the subsections of the department, key performance indicators, knowing that we're hitting those goals.
Mhm.
Oh, by the way, now we're all focused on a singular mission. That gets you to Stan McChrystal's team of teams.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
shared consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now we're all focused. And oh, by the way, everyone has a brain.
Right.
And so that was one of the things that we did as a small team guy,
Mhm.
is if you have 10 people on the team, I don't have time to say, well, James, you're this comms guy and you're the you're the intel guy. This is an ops thing.
Right.
But we don't have that. It's a
Right.
dead gunner drill.
Right.
Everybody needs
Everybody has to be cross-trained. Everybody
And
needs to
then-
know
yeah.
what everybody else can do. You may not be the expert at it,
Right.
but at least you have a functional knowledge in that area.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, going to your point, back in the day when I was running alerts teams, it was, I would have everybody on the team brief the operations order,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Mhm.
everyone, to
Everybody
the
should get a
last,
chance to back brief. Everybody should
Yeah.
get to brief it.
you're doing the commander's back brief because you want to be the best team because everybody is briefing the same mission.
Right.
You got 5 teams and they're all briefing the same mission, and whoever gives the best back brief gets to go on the mission, right?
Right.
So you want to be that guy.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Looking back at the worst teams, long range surveillance teams.
Yeah.
So the back brief is when you're basically telling the commander, this is what I heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Check, right? Okay, good. Then you come back and you do brief backs.
Mhm.
So, but after that, and this is something that businesses could do, is we went into isolation play.
Right. ISO back.
You go in ISO
Mhm.
Yep.
and you're in there for 72, 96 hours.
Mhm.
Then you come out, and one of the things that we did is we would all present our mission,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and the team who had the most sound one got to go on the op.
Right.
So it was competitive
Oh yeah.
that way. And you're like, oh, okay, James, your team's got it.
Yeah.
Start loading helos in 2 hours.
And the funny part is that you make a great point here. I didn't really think about that until you just said that. But if you did that if you did that in an organization, a business organization, civilian organization, and you sat there and go, and maybe they do this. I mean, I haven't been in an organization where they sat down and go, okay, guys, look, this is what we want you to do. Go off into your this team and that team, and whoever comes out and gives me the best briefing gets the
Best
We're
concept.
trademarking this.
And
idea,
it's
by the
kind
way.
of, yeah, I mean, basically it's IDL meets kind of ISO planning.
right, exactly.
And you're bringing it together, and basically if you're developing a new software, okay, take my 3 PMs, project managers,
Mhm.
go with your teams, figure out how you're going to scrum this,
Right.
or PMP,
Right,
whatever
right.
you're doing.
Yep.
Come back. You have 96 hours.
Yep.
I don't care how long you guys are in the office. You want to do the Starbucks over an hour? I don't care.
Right.
But
Yeah.
at noon on Thursday, you guys are all briefing.
You better be ready for a brief.
Yeah,
I'm
and
gonna
then
be ready
you
for
and
a
your
brief.
teams are all there and
Right.
watching everyone else's brief.
Yeah.
Because that way you're taking lessons learned on, oh man, James did a terrible job at it.
Right.
Of course he did. You know, but speaking of competition, I would just think of this. I don't know why I ran into you talking about team of teams.
Right. Yeah.
Sir, I need help with this. General McChrystal, I'm the only one here that doesn't have a signed copy of Team of Teams.
Oh, right. Yeah.
He's got a signed one too. I don't. So I thought we were saving that for something else later. Anyway, yes. I need an autograph, signed copy, sir. Anyway.
But speaking of that as well, the team of teams aspects of it. To your point, Marty, I think there's so many companies, again, not looking at the blocking and tackling, the basics. How do I get to the team of teams, right? That's the problems. They all want to be here. They want to run before they crawled and walked,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
They don't understand that there is that crawl, walk, run, phases. There's 3
Right.
phases to every operation, right? And,
Right.
And if you can't run if you can't do 1 and 2. Walk, crawl, and walk.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of companies fail at today as well. They want to automatically get to that point where they're on the varsity and they're everybody's contributing the same, and not everybody's contributing the same because not everybody understands what their task and purpose is, and it does boil down to task and purpose. And I think that's one thing that we as soldiers
Mhm.
we've learned that from our time in the military. When we go into the business space, and that for me has probably been the hardest thing to transition from when I transitioned from the military into the civilian world from a working perspective, is that whole task and purpose aspect, right? They don't understand what that means.
Right.
And
Well, it's got to be taught. It's got to be
Yeah.
explained. And then again, once they learn it, I
yeah,
think the reason our concept of the way we do business planning, it follows MDMP. We've been saying MDMP a lot. MDMP is mission decision, military decision-making process.
right,
And there's I think we have the best name for it in the Army, MDMP.
right, yeah,
But there's other ones. You've got the Marine Corps, they have theirs.
yeah,
You got joint operational planning process.
yeah.
You got, if you're doing NATO, it's COPE.
COPD, yep.
And so you've got different, but it's it all boils down to the same things. The Brits have the 7 questions,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it goes back to communication.
But
I mean,
it's how do you analyze a mission?
Yeah.
And they're all have that same thing. So
Right.
if you translate that and put that into in the business world, it gives you a better understanding, perhaps quicker.
Right.
Although some would argue that MDMP, very few have ever done entire MDMP
Right.
during a mission because you're like, get rid of this.
Right.
But the things that you can take from it
Right.
are, as you're planning different things, running staff estimates.
Mhm.
mhm.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, so we received this mission. Here's what we're doing. Start your planning. Instead of doing intel analysis, you're doing competitive marketplace analysis. See who else is in there. If you're looking at your pricing strategy, it's still part of mission analysis. You're utilizing Porter's 5 forces
Mhm.
to know, are you overpricing? Who controls the market?
Right. Yeah.
This is all mission analysis.
Yeah.
This is all where you're
Who your
going.
competitor is,
Right.
who, like you said, who controls who controls that market,
Yeah.
right? And I'll hear a lot of my CEO say this every once in a while. We just want a little piece of the pie. Well, what is that piece
What
of
is
the
that?
pie?
Yeah.
And what kind of pie is it?
Right.
I mean, is it strawberry rhubarb? I love strawberry rhubarb. I love that.
Or is
pie.
it turkey pot?
Or yeah, exactly.
I
Or
think you
is
were
it
going to say
mincemeat?
pumpkin pie.
Is
That's
it
what I-
mincemeat? No, pumpkin spice. That would be your pie.
That would be my pie.
Is it mincemeat? Because I'm really not a big fan.
Yeah.
But
You got to understand that.
Yeah,
That's
right.
again, that's mission analysis.
Yeah.
Now you understand it.
Yeah.
Now we say, okay, now how do we break into this market
Yeah.
to get a piece of the pie?
right.
That's mission plan.
Mhm.
Okay,
And
now
then
we
how do you
have,
make the best strawberry rhubarb pie?
right. And so
Because
that's putting everything in there
Exactly.
in the steps.
Yeah.
Because if I just throw everything in there wet and throw it in the oven, it's not going to work.
Right.
So
Exactly.
you have to have the steps right. That's the planning.
Yeah.
And then you execute. And when you execute, it's not fire and forget. You have going back to, okay, are we doing the right things? Are we doing those things right? And then once you've got the piece of the pie to execute, it's over. How do we do?
Right.
Going back and analyze it and then document it. And that's where corporate and military are terrible at documenting.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and that,
Especially if you're in an engineering company.
and so that's
That is the worst.
That's the thing.
Everybody's got it here. Nobody's got it here, right?
That's the
Because
thing
it
that
takes
we
time.
did that I learned
Yeah.
doing my job as a knowledge manager and doing a lot of software development and dashboard development.
Yeah.
Is I brought in one of the first people I brought in was my documenter
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
to sit there and do it all, because at the end you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And we're under time. And now I have
Right.
to tell the customer that we're going to need another 30 days to
Right.
put it all up. Well,
Right.
why didn't you just do it before
Right.
and let them do that? God awful job, but
Right.
very needed.
Right. It is.
Right.
It is. Yeah. No, I had done something very similar when I worked for General Crystal as this KMO. Right. Same
Yeah.
kind of thing. You know, the knowledge management officer. You know, you got to bring. How are we going to document this?
Yeah.
You know, and because you know, well, I mean, I could do it, but you know,
But you want to be able to replicate it.
right.
You don't want to be a one-trick pony. And there's the brilliance of it is
Right.
we did it here, we perfected it, or as close as you can. Now you can pick that up from team one
Mhm.
and mimeograph, going old school.
Right. Yeah.
Zero to team 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
Right.
12.
But that mimeograph stuff smelled so good.
But
Blue ink and everything.
You got
But,
it. Do not smell or sniff the blue ink, please.
but how do you replicate that success?
Right.
And now you've got multiple teams
Mhm.
executing to that same
Yeah.
mission statement with the same task and purpose.
Right.
That's how you get a piece of the pie.
And I think that goes back to my earlier point that I was making. Standards, right?
Yeah.
You got to have the standards, and like when I was in OCS, that was our big thing too. Is standards, no compromise, right?
Right.
That's the motto of the Benning School for Boys.
Yep.
Is standards, no compromise, and I think that's like I said, that's one thing that I take out of what I learned is just exactly that.
Yeah.
And it applies to everything that we do, right? And so,
Right.
and to your point, if everything is, if it's documented, it's referenceable. If it's referenceable, it can be replicated. If it's replicated,
Right.
I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Now I can improve, right?
Right.
Because as any standard operating procedure or SOPs, we know, it can be, it's a document, but at the same time, it's a dynamic document.
Right.
It should be.
And that's a
It
point.
should be.
As we did this doing KMO again, in the military, we have different planning teams
Mhm.
that are based on different planning horizons.
Mhm.
And so it could start in plans, which was the G5, J5.
Right.
And so their planning horizon is 6 months on.
Mhm.
And so they start a project. And if you document it, when you move it over to the 3-5, the future operations,
Right.
which is 72 hours to 6 months, I'm just
Mhm.
throwing these out there. Nothing worse than going, how did they come to this
Right.
conclusion?
Exactly.
Where
Yeah.
you just moved over all the running staff estimates, everything that they've come up with at that point, and they're like, I got it. But then guess what? They're not going to execute it, and plans isn't going to execute it. It's going to the floor, and the floor is where the 3-3 is current operations.
Mhm.
They're executing,
Right.
and
Yeah.
they don't have time to ever ask how they got to any of these things. They're just taking it for law
Yeah.
and
Right.
make it
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
because you're too busy looking at a screen and
Mhm.
watching, drone footage or whatever,
Right. Exactly.
and getting
Yeah.
battlefield updates.
Updates. Yeah. Exactly.
So
And that's, we were talking about the digital battlefield now,
Right.
and that's the downside of having a digital battlefield too. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse at the
Yeah.
same time, right? I've got too much data.
yeah,
What do I do with that?
that's what I
I
said.
mean,
the deluge of data. Right? What do you,
Advanced intelligence kind of helps with that because you can parse some of that data now with AI, but you're still inundated. And how do you make that? How do I make that decision?
Right.
One of the things that, in my personal opinion, I think the Army doing away with the long range surveillance, human
was
intelligence
ridiculous.
on the battlefield, to me, not
We're
having
partial.
not human, not
No hidden
having
agenda there.
not having humans on the battlefield
Yeah.
is to me is the wrong way to go. But that's
Right.
not my decision to make. However, do you know the Air Force now has alert teams?
right?
Why is that? Well, because they weren't getting enough
It's-
intel.
Because you
You
need
know,
it on the ground.
you
You need
right.
someone.
I gotta have some way of being able to make a good decision.
Drones are great, vehicles are, but you still need someone to go park the bushes.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Okay.
just like our footage here, we've had to mess with the camera a little bit. Technology will fail.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
period.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still going to take boots on ground, eyes on
Eyes on
objective.
target, that kind of stuff. You gotta be able to do that. You
And
gotta
so
be able to
somebody who can
laser
come
target.
back and say, hey, the map data is wrong. This is your updated hydrology
Right.
report.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
You're not going to build your subsurface height site here.
Yeah.
because it's underwater.
Right.
Unless you're using a submarine, you
Right. And some of that too is local knowledge. If
Yeah.
we've planned operations where they're like, well, that's not going to work because your tanks won't make it between this month and this month.
right, exactly.
Well, that, yes, that's local knowledge, but it's kind of like having a worse team on the ground. Somebody on the ground who knows, okay, this is right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, no, absolutely. And I think, so there's a lot of lessons learned that business can learn, but then also that we can learn from business.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a
And-
two-way
and-
street.
And
for
the other
sure.
thing, the other thing is like agile scrum.
Yeah.
We need to plan faster.
Yeah.
But comprehensive.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we had the rapid decision making, or RDSP, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
we had these
RDP,
different
right?
RDP, yeah. We had these different
rapid decision
things.
making, RDMP, rapid decision making process.
We had these different things, but at the same time, it comes back to is what information do I need to make a decision?
Right.
And so it goes back to understanding what's important,
Right.
and then how do I get to that, and what's feeding that decision point, right? The decisive point of battle.
Right.
I need to make a decision, launch or don't launch.
Right.
And then understanding that whether you're working in corporate America or you're an alerts team or freaking a signal guy, whatever it is, that's really where you make your money.
Right.
Well, it's just
yeah.
like in the business world, expectations, and then actually planning it out and letting the situation develop. Having tactical patience to sit
Right.
back and say,
Yeah.
hey, look, we need to not push forward on this. We need to sit back on this project and let it develop first before we actually put any funds or money into the marketing or whatever that may be. So I think a lot of times we actually, because we are so focused in on the bottom line and making the money in the business world, that we get too fixated on the end result instead of letting the conditions set up prior to, calling for fires, prior to getting on the objective.
Right.
I think the tactical patience combined with digital patience,
Yes.
Yes.
but then going back to being, it's okay to have a map board.
Right.
And so some of the best things that we did as a planner is the CG, General Hogue, love him to death. He would come in while we were executing operations in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of waiting for us to develop the PowerPoint slides, chimping the slides, he would just come in and we would do, here, sir, on the whiteboard, here's what we'll look
Right.
at.
Yeah.
Right.
You're whiteboarding the war.
Right.
That's great.
And so then we took that with the commander's intent and then put it into a slide.
Sure.
So it still has to go in a slide or
Right.
a plan but instead of coming up with it and then going swing and a miss.
Right.
Yeah.
He came in, we actually moved the couch in, and him and the AFRICOM commander could sit there and look at it, and we could make a decision and write it out, and so they would give us what they thought.
Right.
And then we go, okay, make it happen.
Right.
And then we push it out. So there's,
In many ways, what you were doing is you were taking the agile process and you were moving forward with that,
Right.
from a plans perspective.
Yeah.
So the RDMP process that was being executed, you just didn't know it at the time, right?
Right.
I mean, to be honest, but yeah, I mean, and that's both of you guys make a really good point. I mean, and I can relate to that in what I'm doing today, where, I also have built out, a $10 million business in transportation for the company I'm working for on the commercial side.
Mhm.
And it's the lead times in the business cycle is like 2 years because you're dealing with, and it's different in the US versus transportation in Europe because especially around trains and metros and those kind of things because in Europe, everything's owned by so everything with dealing with rail or tracks, that's all owned by the government.
Yeah.
And then they have, what they call TOCs or transportation operating companies that operate their trains and lease the lines, right?
Yeah.
In the US, everything's owned by private business.
Yeah.
And state and local governments, they run the metros. And so they got their own budgets, but and so you're dealing with a longer sales cycle.
right.
And to your point about setting the conditions and patience, to be able to run that campaign,
Mhm.
it makes it difficult because it is for a lot of companies. They're like, oh yeah, but we've been in this space for 3 years. It took you 2 years to get to this point, but we're not getting the return on our investment that we've invested here. And I'm like, going, well, bottom line is that we've also been in a pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Right.
anything that we had in the pipeline, that was already set up, now it's been pushed two more years to the right. So you got to have patience, but they're not seeing it that way because their investors are looking at it from a different perspective as well, right? So I mean, you're getting pressure and that makes it difficult because there's the lack of patience on their part, right?
Right.
And it does make it, and it's kind of hard pressed, from my perspective many times, because I'll sit there and go, well, guys, you just got to kind of take a deep breath and let the war come to you.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Be prepared for what's going to happen. But sometimes you just got to take a deep breath and let it come to you, and then fight it out, right?
Yeah.
Close the didnce and make sure you're closing the distance.
So I knew this was going to happen. So we get so fixated on, 2-3 dinosaurs together. We didn't even ask you what he's doing now. So what are you doing now? Like, what is your position now? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So like when I came off, I was working in the defense space for a long time, just because I knew the space. And, going to your point, Marty, that you brought about is that, a couple of weeks ago on your podcast, you talked about, and in Jason's book as well, Jason Van Camp's book, Deliberate Discomfort, that's a great book as well. And one of the things that he brings up is getting outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What makes me comfortable is being in the defense space, because I know it so well.
Right.
I mean, 26 years, you're bound to learn something, right? Maybe. but at the end of the day, when I had an opportunity to switch over into transportation, I took that opportunity because it's new. It's exciting. I'm bored with what I'm doing. I could do what I was doing in my sleep.
Right.
Now I'm over here and in the transportation space. So I'm doing roadways, and I'm working with a company that's doing smart pavement.
Right.
So they're putting sensors in the pavement. They're putting conductive charging capabilities in the pavement. So when you drive your electric vehicle over that piece of pavement, it charges it, right?
Yeah.
So those kind of things, and so I'm hooking up the networks for that, right? So on the roadside, and then working with trains, putting onboard networks there, so that you can have a customer experience. So the passenger information systems, or PIS as they call them, will tell you when. By the way, your train is coming in. It's going to be at this stop in 2 minutes, right? Or 5 minutes out. So when you're riding the metro up in DC, you're sitting there, you're getting real time information on the location from a GPS that's on the train or on the bus, right? And then in intersections, making those smart. So not only that, and then take a look. I do a lot from a security perspective because of my background in the military. It gives me a different perspective on how to do security for a lot of these organizations. So, you're able to sit there and pull all that together. Different challenges.
Yeah.
But you're trying to solve in many ways, still solving for why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day,
the process can carry over.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you talked about skunk works earlier.
Right.
You're still skunk.
I'm still skunk working, right? I mean, I sat up in. I got a customer up in Vancouver, Canada, who's trying to put our onboard gateway onto their ferries, right, in Vancouver. And how do we do this? And what are we going to? How are we going to do X, Y, Z? So I look at it. You look at a schematic, and I said, well, this can go here. We can do this, this, and this. Let's go test it.
Right.
Right. And so you design the architecture on the fly, and you go in and do it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Then we just go back again. We go back, we recock, we figure out what didn't work, we figure out what might work, and then use the next technology. Whatever's next,
And that reminds me of when we used to do a demo day, and it would just be, here's a whole bunch of stuff. I need you to make this kind of explosive device that'll do X, Y, and Z.
Right. Yeah.
There you go. And that was pretty good. What'd you do on that? How much did you?
You
did. How much core and how much deck core?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. The focus is on the end state.
Yeah.
How do we get there? 15 different ways.
Back
to we talked about the ISO plan, right?
Right.
Teams are doing the different things.
Right. But you're always trying to solve for why, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's really the end state. And I think that's where I think the other aspect of what we do and what we've done in the military, that really applies into the space, because we have the ability to plan on we know that our plan is not going to work on first contact.
Right.
So we got to be able to be flexible, right? And I think prepping the battlefield, being patient, letting it come to you, that all plays out. I think that really plays well in our space,
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time, and I'm gonna have to move out of the way, but it's time to ask you does freedom mean to you? So you've served, you've sacrificed,
Yeah.
you've done so much for our nation. So I'm going to ask you, what does freedom mean to you? And then I'm going to go zoom in.
All right. Well, what does freedom mean to me? Just was more prepared for this question. I think for me it boils down to family, and making sure that every American has the same freedoms that we all have, right? I mean, traveling the world, we see different things, and we see families the way they are, and looking at the families now down in Florida, it's just that feeling of togetherness that we get, and the freedoms that we have to be able to actually go and do the things that we want to be able to do together. Come from a long line of people that served in the military, all the way back to the to the Revolutionary War, if you will. But they've all given that sacrifice, and I think that for me, I was always willing to do that. My wife also served, so like yourself, I'm also a dependent, if you will. So a lot of that, where I think that it really boils down to family, and I think that's what the military is taught me. And from a freedom perspective, is that without the people that sacrifice and do the things that we do, we wouldn't have the freedom to be a family, right?
Right. Yeah, awesome. All right, there's James again. All right, so I'll get it. What's that? But no, I love the answer though.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is about freedom to do as you want, especially with your family. To evacuate or not to evacuate.
Right.
Some
Yes.
people do. And so, I mean, it's relative. You have the facts, you make the decisions, and you do what you want, or you do as you desire to.
Right,
We're talking
right.
about your desired end state. If you
Sure.
want to do this, you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to have your own podcast, you want to get out of the military, switch from the defense over to transportation.
Right. Get out of your comfort zone.
Right.
I mean, whatever, and that, to be honest, that was another conversation I had with my nephew on Saturday, was that just exactly that. Look, you don't have to focus on this. This is where you were comfortable at. I said, you gotta get comfortable getting uncomfortable.
Absolutely. That's my workout principle.
Speaking of uncomfortable,
Yes.
somebody's having a birthday this weekend coming up.
Who?
Aren't you having a birthday?
No.
I thought you were doing an Army 10 miler. Isn't that a birthday?
I feel like I'm giving birth.
Yeah, I thought you were having a birthday on the Army
No.
10 mile. So before he gets going, just so everyone knows, I am not going to be able to attend the 10 mile, the Army 10 mile. I'm actually injured. Okay, I hurt my. So I hurt my foot. No kidding. I got to suck my pride up, but I'm not going to be there. I want to let everybody know that I won't be running 10 miles this year. And there's a book you talked about, not yet. I'm not going to run it yet this year, and I'm going to have to listen to my body for once. But, Alan, thank you so much for being our guest today. And thank you, WeWork here at One Glenwood in Raleigh, for hosting us. And it was an amazing episode. I don't know if you have any parting words besides another cry for me for not
No,
running.
I think so. Next week we'll be on the road,
Yes.
and so you're going where?
I'm going to Vegas. Going to be at Vegas. I'd much rather, well, I wouldn't say I'd rather be there with you in Nashville, but I'll be in Vegas speaking as the keynote for the EXP Military Network. We're having a breakfast there next Friday, and we will be there, and I'll be speaking, representing Lounge of Legends and Joint Task Force 214.
Hanging out with Grant Cardone.
Grant Cardone, Elena Cardone, Lisa Copeland, Haas Pratt, Tardik. Hoping to get to some autographs if you're listening. Get some autographs from that. But ready for that. But who will you be hanging out with in Nashville?
I'll be with the Story Brand team, Donald Miller and all them in Nashville.
Man,
so we are,
awesome.
we're dividing and conquering.
Yes.
So it's
We're
going to be,
splitting
and
forces.
so we got Sunday is the Army 10 miler,
Yes.
going into AUSA week. 2 days of that. Get on a plane. I'm going to Nashville, and you're going to launch and go to your stuff in Vegas. So it's going to be really intense.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be fun.
And then what do we have on October 20th? We have our Story Brand training. So you can go to go.jtf214 and how to create profitable products. So it's going to be amazing. Go.jtf214. You can sign up and register for that. So that's our free training. So,
And then make sure to connect up with Alan. We should name this episode Plane, Trains, and Automobiles. That's what we should have called this episode. But make sure you connect with Alan. He is a great mentor, great leader. Has given back so much. So make sure you connect with him. We'll pop his information in the link in the comments below, probably his LinkedIn profile, and connect with him. Great asset to have on your team.
all right. Well, thank you for being our legend.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah, now I got to get him a
It's an
hat.
honor.
There you go. All right. Be legendary.
You've been watching the Lounge with Legend show, countering the narrative that veterans are all broken misfit toys. Veterans are the lifeblood of American freedom. Serving in harsh situations, coupled with their training, have forged them into some of the most resilient and capable leaders in the world. And that's where we come in, celebrating the success stories, taking you on a journey of transformation from military to business. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back soon. But find us on Facebook at Lounge with Legend or at JTF214. Till next time.